The committee room buzzes with the sterile hum of C-SPAN cameras as Caroline Leavitt clicks her remote, projecting a carefully curated Fox News segment onto the overhead screen. The clip shows Representative Jasmine Crockett's voice rising in what appears to be an unprovoked outburst, stripped of all context, edited to maximum inflammatory effect. Leavitt's smile widens as she delivers her prepared line. This kind of divisive rhetoric from certain members of Congress demonstrates exactly the problem we're discussing today. The Republican communications advisor pauses, savoring what she believes is her gotcha moment. But in that silence, something shifts in Crockett's posture. A subtle straightening, a quiet breath, the kind of stillness that precedes a storm. Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The House committee room stretches like a judicial amphitheater, its mahogany panels and brass nameplates designed to project authority, dignity, institutional weight. But today, those symbols serve a different purpose. They become props in a carefully orchestrated performance of dismissal. The hearing on media responsibility and democratic discourse was supposed to examine disinformation, but it has devolved into something more familiar, a stage where Black women's voices are weaponized against them. Crockett sits at the witness panel, one of only 3 Democratic voices in a sea of Republican-friendly testimonies. The procedural deck is stacked, 5 conservative media experts to 2 progressive voices, with time allocations that favor lengthy Republican questioning and abbreviated Democratic responses. This is institutional theater at its most refined, the appearance of fairness masking a rigged game. Leavitt, blonde and polished in her navy blazer, represents everything the conservative media apparatus has perfected over decades. A former Trump press aide turned communications consultant, she moves through these halls with the confidence of someone who knows the game is designed for her to win. Her testimony packet includes carefully selected clips, strategic talking points, and the kind of media literacy that comes from years of crafting narratives rather than seeking truth. The committee chairman, a Republican from Ohio, whose own media appearances lean heavily on culture war grievances, has already set the tone. His opening remark positioned the hearing as an examination of inflammatory rhetoric from elected officials rather than systemic media manipulation. The framing is intentional. Make the victims of media distortion defend their reactions to being distorted. As Leavitt begins her presentation, the room settles into a familiar rhythm. Republican members lean forward with interest. Democratic members check their phones, already knowing how this performance will unfold. The press gallery captures everything, but they're focused on the wrong story. They're waiting for fireworks when they should be watching for precision. The first 30 minutes proceed exactly as scripted. Conservative witnesses testify about divisive language from Democratic politicians. Republican committee members nod approvingly and ask softball questions that allow for extended monologues about media bias against conservatives. The Democrats get 3-minute response periods that feel more like speed dating than substantive inquiry. Crockett watches it all with the patience of someone who has seen this movie before. She takes notes, but not frantically. She observes, but doesn't react. There's something unnerving about her composure, the kind of calm that comes from understanding not just what's happening, but what's about to happen. The institutional weight of the room presses down like humidity. These hearings are designed to exhaust rather than illuminate, to create sound bites rather than solutions. Every Democratic attempt to redirect towards substantive media literacy or platform accountability gets redirected back to individual conduct. The message is clear. The problem isn't systemic media manipulation, it's individual Democrats who react too strongly to being manipulated. Levitt approaches her signature moment with the confidence of a prosecutor who believes she holds the smoking gun. She has spent weeks preparing this particular segment, working with conservative media producers to craft the perfect encapsulation of her thesis. That Democratic politicians, particularly black women, manufacture outrage for political gain. The Fox News clip she's prepared represents the apex of selective editing. It shows Crockett raising her voice during a previous committee hearing, but strips away every second of context, the repeated interruptions, the procedural violations, the systematic silencing that preceded her response. In Levitt's version, Crockett appears to explode unprovoked, confirming every stereotype about black women's temperament that conservative media loves to propagate. This is precisely what we're talking about, Levitt says, clicking her remote with theatrical timing. When elected officials choose divisive rhetoric over constructive dialogue, they poison the well of democratic discourse. The room's attention focuses on the screen as the clip begins. Crockett's voice fills the chamber, elevated and frustrated, responding to something the audience cannot see. The editing is surgical. No context, no build-up, just the reaction. It's media manipulation at its most cynical, and everyone in the room knows it. But here's what Levitt doesn't understand. Crockett came prepared for exactly this moment. While Levitt was crafting her attack, Crockett was doing something different, homework. Her staff had compiled every instance of Republican members raising their voices in committee hearings over the past 2 years. They had documented every time white male politicians were described as passionate for behavior that earned black women labels like angry or divisive. They had prepared not just defensive responses, but offensive capabilities. More importantly, Crockett had obtained the full, unedited footage of the hearing that Fox News had selectively chopped up. She knew exactly what had been removed, and she knew the institutional memory of everyone in this room was short enough that most wouldn't remember the original context. As Levitt's clip plays, Crockett doesn't watch the screen. She watches the room. She sees Republican members nodding along, Democratic members wincing, and journalists scribbling notes about another heated exchange. She sees the trap being set, and she's ready to turn it inside out. The clip ends, and Levitt's smile widens. This kind of behavior, she continues, is exactly why Americans are losing faith in their elected officials. When members of Congress can't control their own emotions, how can they be trusted with the people's business? The attack is comprehensive and calculated. It hits racial stereotypes about black women's temperament, gendered expectations about emotional control, and partisan talking points about Democratic grandstanding. It's designed to be devastating. Instead, it becomes the moment everything changes. Crockett's response begins not with words, but with silence. She lets Levitt's attack hang in the air for exactly 5 seconds, long enough for its implications to settle, short enough to maintain momentum. When she speaks, her voice carries the kind of calm that makes everyone in the room lean forward. I'd like to ask the committee to play the full footage of that exchange, she says, producing a tablet from her briefcase. Because what we just witnessed is precisely the problem we're supposed to be addressing: the selective manipulation of context to serve a narrative. The committee chairman shifts uncomfortably. This isn't following the script. Levitt's confident smile begins to falter as she realizes she's no longer controlling the narrative flow. Crockett continues with surgical precision. The clip we just saw removed 4 minutes and 37 seconds of procedural violations that preceded my response. It removed the repeated attempts to silence me, the points of order that were ignored, and the systematic denial of my right to speak. But more importantly, it demonstrates exactly how media manipulation works, not through outright lies, but through strategic omissions. She taps her tablet, and the full footage begins to play. The committee room watches as the true context unfolds: Crockett being repeatedly interrupted, her microphone being cut, Republican members talking over her, the chairman ignoring her points of order. The response that appeared unprovoked in the Fox News clip now reveals itself as the natural culmination of systematic silencing. The room's energy shifts palpably. Republican members stop taking notes. Democratic members straighten in their chairs. The press gallery suddenly realizes they're witnessing something more significant than routine partisan sparring. But Crockett isn't finished. With the methodical precision of a prosecutor building a case, she produces a second set of footage: Republican committee members raising their voices, pointing fingers, even pounding tables during various hearings over the past 2 years. Representative Jordan, she says, highlighting a clip of the Ohio Republican shouting during a judiciary hearing, was described by conservative media as passionate and principled for this behavior. Representative Gates, another clip appears, was called fiery and uncompromising for similar conduct. But when I respond to being systematically silenced, suddenly it's divisive rhetoric and evidence of emotional instability. The institutional hypocrisy becomes undeniable. The same behavior that earns white male Republicans praise for passion earns black women condemnation for lacking composure. The double standard isn't just present, it's systematically documented. Leavitt attempts to interrupt, but Crockett's momentum is unstoppable. This isn't about media bias, she continues. This is about media literacy. It's about understanding how selective editing, strategic context removal, and racialized double standards work together to manipulate public perception. The committee room falls into the kind of silence that accompanies institutional exposure. This isn't just about one edited clip. It's about the entire apparatus of how black women's voices are processed, packaged, and weaponized by media systems designed to diminish them. Levitt's recovery attempt reveals exactly how unprepared she was for this level of institutional pushback. Her media training has equipped her for dealing with predictable Democratic responses: outrage, defensiveness, appeals to fairness. She has no tools for handling systematic deconstruction of her methodology. Representative Crockett is simply proving my point, she says, reaching for familiar talking points. This is exactly the kind of victim mentality that prevents constructive dialogue. She's blaming the media instead of taking responsibility for her own words. But the words sound hollow now, because everyone in the room has just witnessed the systematic context removal that preceded those words. Leavitt's attack has been neutralized not through emotional appeal, but through documentary evidence. Crockett's response arrives with devastating precision. It's not about taking responsibility for my words. It's about taking responsibility for your edits. The line lands like a judicial ruling. The committee room erupts not in partisan applause, but in the kind of uncomfortable recognition that accompanies institutional truth-telling. Republican members shuffle papers. Democratic members suppress smiles. The press gallery realizes they're no longer covering a routine hearing. They're documenting a masterclass in media literacy. But the true devastation comes in Crockett's final move. She produces one more piece of evidence: internal communications from conservative media outlets discussing the strategic editing of her previous appearances. The documents, obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests, reveal explicit conversations about how to frame the angry black woman narrative for maximum political impact. The institutional mask slips completely. This isn't about media responsibility or democratic discourse. It's about systematic narrative manipulation designed to diminish black women's political authority. The evidence is documentary, undeniable, and devastating. Levitt's face goes through a progression of expressions: confidence to confusion to barely concealed panic. She came prepared for a different conversation, one where context could be controlled and narratives managed. Instead, she's facing institutional accountability at its most precise. The committee chairman attempts to regain control by calling for a brief recess, but the damage is irreversible. The narrative that Levitt spent weeks crafting has been systematically dismantled and turned into evidence of exactly the media manipulation the hearing was supposed to address. Within minutes of the exchange, clips begin circulating across social media platforms. But these aren't the usual partisan sound bites that disappear in news cycles. This is something different. Documentary evidence of systematic media manipulation presented with institutional authority and undeniable precision. The conservative media ecosystem that amplified Levitt's original attack finds itself in an impossible position. They can't defend the selective editing because the full context has been revealed. They can't attack Crockett's response because it was purely evidential. They can't shift to familiar talking points about victimhood because the documentation is too comprehensive. The clips that go viral tell a complete story: the attempted manipulation, the systematic deconstruction, and the institutional exposure of media bias. It's not just good television, it's civic education in real time. Editorial boards begin calling for broader investigations into selective editing practices. Media literacy organizations use the exchange as a teaching tool. Law schools added to curricula about evidence presentation and institutional advocacy. But the true victory isn't in the immediate response, it's in the institutional precedent. Crockett has demonstrated that systematic media manipulation can be systematically deconstructed, that careful preparation can neutralize even sophisticated narrative attacks, and that institutional knowledge remains the most powerful tool for political truth-telling. The hearing continues for another hour, but it's purely procedural. The substantive work has been completed. A masterclass in institutional accountability has been delivered, documented, and preserved for future reference. As the session concludes, Crockett packs her materials with the same methodical precision she brought to her response. No grandstanding, no victory laps, just the quiet satisfaction of institutional work completed at the highest level. The conservative media apparatus will regroup, refine their approaches, and attempt new strategies. But they'll do so knowing that careful preparation, systematic documentation, and institutional knowledge can neutralize even their most sophisticated attacks. In a political environment increasingly defined by emotion over evidence, Crockett has demonstrated the enduring power of homework over hyperbole, precision over passion, and institutional literacy over institutional manipulation. The moment has passed, but its implications will resonate through future hearings, media appearances, and political exchanges. A new standard has been established, not just for how Black women's voices should be respected, but for how systematic media manipulation can be systematically challenged. The committee room empties, but the institutional truth remains. When preparation meets precision, even the most sophisticated narrative manipulation becomes evidence of its own corruption. The tools of institutional power, when wielded with expertise and evidence, remain capable of delivering justice even in spaces designed to prevent it. It's not just what the media shows, it's what they choose to cut. And that cut right there was the whole strategy. The strategy has been exposed, documented, and defeated. The institution, for this moment at least, has served its highest purpose.